Good evening, I'm David Nicholas. Next, here on CMU Public Television, Representative Charles Brunner joins me on Capitol Report.
Welcome to Capitol Report, a weekly discussion with your elected officials on the issues and concerns that affect you.
Thanks again for being with us as we welcome back to our program Representative Charles Brunner, a Democrat from Bay City, currently serving in his second term as a representative from the 96th District. Representative, good to see you and welcome back to our program.
Pleasure to be here as always. It's like coming home, CMU.
That's right. In the Senate this week, there's going to be testimony on bills that passed your body, the House, last year, bills that would revive the operation for dispensaries for medical marijuana. To back up a little bit, but to put it in perspective as well, what was your vote when that House vote came through, and what's your position on how or if we should be moving forward with this aspect of the bill?
Well, I believe I was a yes vote. I, like many of the voters, when it passed, through a vote of the people back in, I think you said it was 2008. I think I, like the voters, thought it would be something that would be available for medicinal purposes, that you would go to the drugstore and purchase. I believe I supported it at the time. I was running into people that, had medical issues that this would help. And so I continued to support it, but it opened up a real can of worms when it was passed, because nobody knew. First of all, you have to have growers, then you have to have dispensers, and of course you have to receive it medicinally. And I'm not sure what the reasons somebody would qualify for that, but I believe it has to be a doctor that would prescribe that. And so then what are the penalties for all the people that are involved in this chain? And so there was a series of hearings when Representative Horn was still on the was still serving, along with a good friend of mine, Phil Cavanaugh. They were in a committee that was researching this, and they're just trying to narrow it down, define, and make sure that, first of all, the people that grow it do it properly, they're licensed, and the people that dispense it do the same thing, and that the folks that really need it for medical purposes are the ones that are receiving it. So the legislature continues to define it. I think the folks have spoken, and they're I think the public even is kind of softening their take on marijuana, as we've seen in Colorado, but that's a whole nother can of worms that's been opened out there since they legalized it, and they've got some real problems. So we continue to refine it. I do support it, but we need to make sure that it is controlled, it's controlled properly, and that our law enforcement has the proper tools to make sure that's done properly, and in the end that we put it in the hands of the folks that truly can benefit from it, and that's all done legally. So the process continues to be refined.
We'll see questions again on this fall's ballot to be sure. People have received approval for language, collecting petition signatures. We'll watch the process play through. I wonder, during your time in the legislature so far, or even with the issues that we're seeing coming up this year, the process itself, most people point back to that medical marijuana law and say that as written it was one of the worst. And you certainly pointed that out too, that as written, agree or disagree, but in terms of defining exactly what it was supposed to be, a very poorly written ballot proposal went through, passed, but now we're left with trying to sort it out and, as you said, define it.
Right.
How much sway or influence do lawmakers have, or can lawmakers take if people start to bring this forward or try to get all of you to write a bill, to take something and say, okay, this is a good issue, but not as written, before we see then this leap to, well, we're going to take it to the people. And in some cases, as in the case with the medical marijuana law, we wind up with something that was so badly put together that we've seen court challenges, and now we're seeing legislation and everything to kind of go back and fix what has been put in place.
Well, it's a very unique situation or problem, if you will, and that's something that can be grown easily. People have to be licensed, and you know, it's one that to be honest with you, the committee process, the folks that are involved in the committee, and I'm not sure what, forgive me, I'm not sure what committee it came through, but have done a lot of hearings, and they keep attempting and trying to fix this law to deal with this medical marijuana issue, basically keeping in mind that they still want to make sure that it's available to the people that truly can benefit from it. But in the end, law enforcement is having some real difficulties with some of the issues, as I mentioned earlier, with the growers and the dispensers, trying to keep those people in check so that they're not, you know, obviously people aren't growing it that aren't licensed to, and same thing with the dispensaries, if they're not licensed to do that, to keep them in check and make sure that they're doing everything they need to do. So it continues to be refined, and yes, it can, it certainly can, anything can be changed if it's a law in Lansing, if you can garner support for it. So, you know, they continue to work on it. It hasn't come through any of the committees. I'm on agriculture, and it hasn't come through agriculture, so I assume probably regulatory reform or one of those other committees that deals with it. So they continue to wrestle with it. It's probably a good way to put it.
Since it is here and left so many unanswered questions, are there those that have knocked on your door, rang your phone, and said, let's take the next leap and let's go to full legalization, as we've now seen in Colorado and other states?
You know, as I sit here and I say, my phone hasn't rung with folks, at least it's not a resounding effect, because, you know, I have some folks that answer the phone and we deal with the issues, and of course they kind of let me know what's going on, but there hasn't been a resounding number of people that have contacted us to say, let's legalize marijuana for everyone.
Another issue that is out and in consideration and certainly under the microscope right now, the proposal for year-round schools. Your background comes from education. The proposal that was written, the $2 million that is being weighed to set up a so-called pilot program to see how this would work. How much can you help us understand what is in that proposal, how many schools it would affect, and what, in essence, that $2 million would do to run a pilot program before we might consider this more statewide?
Well, I don't have the details of the proposal, but I do support year-round schools. I mean, and I taught school for 30 years in a traditional calendar system with Midland Public Schools, and at one point they were very seriously considering a year-round school, because one of the high schools in Midland, I think they both are now, the newer high school was fully air-conditioned. So why not take advantage of that building in the summertime? Again, going back to the calendar, which was created around agriculture, so that students would have summers off to go work in the fields, on the farm, whatever. Obviously, we don't necessarily need that right now, but we continue to have that. So what they're looking at as far as a proposal, this is the way I understand it, is for a period of time to have school and then a period of weeks off. And then, for instance, the one that was under consideration in Midland was 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off. And I thought it was a great idea, but one of the things they're really wrestling with was, how do sports play into that? And, you know, sports is, while a lot of people will say, you know, kids are there to learn, I think sports are a big part of students developing and working as teammates and developing their social skills and so on. So sports is important, and it shouldn't drive the calendar, shouldn't drive, you know, what happens in the school system, but I think it's very integral and very, very important. So I think, I think this, this year-round school, if we can get to the educational piece, you know, it's been said, and this statistically, this can be proven, that students forget a lot during the summer, and it takes a period of time to relearn and then continue on. So if we have this year-round school, then we're not losing that touch with certain subject areas and not having to reteach things at the start of the year. So I'm fully supportive of year-round school. I think it'd be a great thing for our kids. I mean, I'm not sure how this proposal has designed the calendar, but in the end, at least the one that was being proposed in Midland was where they would basically have the same amount of time. It would just be in smaller increments throughout the school year, with the idea that we can keep the educational process going through the entire year.
What about the aspect, and I'm glad you raised the point of build around the agriculture calendar in that industry, and it's true that we see more in the way of migrant workers taking on some of that work that maybe the farm kids did not or do not have to do to the greatest extent. But what about tourism? We're not that far removed when we made a shift that all schools would start after Labor Day, so there could be maybe that one last push to get people out to help support seasonal businesses. Again, we don't have the proposal sitting right in front of us, but I wonder if you could kind of speculate on what impact we might see when, families might know, okay, we've got 3 weeks, 9, whatever that proposal might be, but in terms of the overall effect as to how we would see that traffic be affected.
Well, and that's why it's a good thing to do a pilot program to see, what's going to happen with those folks and when are they going to take, how are they going to build in their vacations and what effect would it have on, and of course that would be very small scale, but it's a very valid point. Tourism is growing by leaps and bounds in the state of Michigan. For every dollar that we spent on Pure Michigan, we get $5 back. So tourism it's really huge and growing so much to a large number of communities. It's something to take into consideration when you're looking at the year-round school. And I would assume that one of those periods that they would have off during the school year would be during the summer, so families could take vacations and so on.
As we sit down here on a Monday for our conversation, tourism interests are in Traverse City. Mm-hmm. In fact, right today, one of the focal points is those connected with the Pure Michigan campaign, industry as a whole, the continued blend between tourism and agriculture, two of your committees that you sit on. And we think about wine tours and the foodie hubs and things like that, maybe further up north. But if we bring this down to your 96th district, how are you seeing those two blending together in terms of economic development, growth, expansion, and how might it continue to grow in an area that's not all the way up at the tip of the mitt?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. A couple things that we're doing in the 96th district, at least one, I just met with the county executive and the environmental coordinator, and along with the Chamber of Commerce, this is one of their goals, is to develop our state park in Bay City. Beautiful campgrounds, but we have a horrendous beach. And so I'm willing to, it's time to get behind a plan that says we're going to clean out the muck, give more access to the beach, and we're looking at putting a pier out into the bay. So I think it's a very good question. Tourism is something that we can definitely take a look at and capitalize on more in the 96th district. Now, getting back to your question about the farm markets, actually it wasn't about farm markets, it was about agriculture and tourism kind of coming together. I think farm markets are a big piece of that, wineries are a big piece of that, craft brewers and beers are a big piece of that, all of which we're looking to do what we can to expand with the idea that those are big draws for people to come into communities. So I know we just voted on some legislation to allow the craft brewers to brew more beer and distribute more beer. And the wineries, of course, are growing. It seems to be something that folks really enjoy as long as they can do it sensibly, visiting the different wineries in the communities. And, of course, Bay City, the farmers market, has been struggling recently to find a location. But that's one that we continue to look at. As a matter of fact, there's a group that a couple folks I'm meeting with this week to talk about finding a good place for the farmers market in downtown Bay City. I know Flint just is relocating theirs. Lansing put up a new building in downtown Lansing for their farmers market. And so And it's kind of interesting. I didn't even realize this till I got on agriculture. This is the city boy that I am. That they actually do grow the stuff and they pick it that morning or the day before, and then they bring it to the farmers market. And so it really is turning out to be a hub of activity, and not only with the the fruits and vegetables that they bring, but they bring flowers, and then you have folks that show up from bakeries and even some resale or antique vendors show up, and it's a nice draw for a community. It really is. And so agriculture, it just makes sense that agriculture should be a piece of tourism in a draw.
One city boy to another, so it's been a learning curve for me too when it comes to dealing with things like this. When you mentioned the development and the pier and in the beaches and so forth regarding the bay, Senators Levin and Stabenow announced recently funding, federal dollars that are coming in for dredging projects. We've got some dollar figures, but not a lot of specifics, and I don't know how much, if any, has filtered down to know, is there a particular area of the Saginaw River, or when we look at the whole cycle of the water levels being down and now coming back naturally, given the snowpack and the ice and so forth. But what do we know, if anything, about the target of where some of that dredging might be doing and what it means for the prospects for both the river and the bay? Yeah,
well, first of all, spring is going to be here someday, and we are going to have some higher water levels, which is good news, because of the freeze of the Great Lakes didn't allow for evaporation of water, and all the snow that we've had, I hope it melts gently and flows back into the lakes. And so, yeah, the levels are going up, but we still have a constant problem in these rivers where everything just washes down into, we got into a real problem last spring, I believe it was, because we had such a rain and a runoff. We had to have some emergency dredging money for the Saginaw River. Forgive me, I don't know which section, and I'm not sure which section is going to be dredged this time, but it's just something that has to be watched. And if we're going to continue to use the Saginaw River for shipping, then it's just something that has to be done on a regular basis. So I don't know which sections are earmarked for the dredging, but I know there's a turnaround basin down by the Saginaw, down by the city of Saginaw, that needed some emergency dredging funds last year. So I would assume it may be in some of those same sections. I don't know, but it's something that's constantly monitored by the Army Corps, and when it gets down to a certain level, then they alert the Army Corps, then lets the congressmen know, and the folks in Washington, who are the ones that basically deal with the money for that kind of thing, to appropriate the money to make sure that that channel is kept open as a shipping channel.
With that approach of spring, and we've already seen the action in Lansing to take up some emergency funding for the roads. The governor is still asking for that long-term of over $1 billion over a span of 10 years, $1 billion per year to, quote unquote, truly fix the problem. Where do we stand right now in terms of that amount? Is that still being compromised as to the amount of the emergency funding that will go, where that money is going to come from, and what are people telling you about the roads that they're already finding as some of that snow melts out there?
Well, roads are the topic wherever you go. There isn't a person that you run into that doesn't agree that roads need fixing. But the problem lies is how we're going to pay for it. When you have gas prices that continue to spiral upward, we're at about $3.65 right now, I think. Do we add it to the gas tax somehow with an increase? I think currently we're paying somewhere around 19 cents as far as the tax, a portion of which, interestingly enough, is dedicated to education. So there were some ideas being floated around to take that money that's dedicated to education and actually use the money that's dedicated to education to fix the roads. Now that puts a big hole in education, and then possibly increase the sales tax and dedicate that increase to education to cover the money from the sales tax. So
did those numbers balance out as they were proposed?
I don't know what you would generate. I want to say it's somewhere around $600 million. Again, please don't quote me on those figures. But there is a large chunk of money that goes to education. And so take that money, which almost makes sense. But then again, education can't take any more hits. So if I'm not sure what 1% increase in the sales tax or 2% would garner as far as funds, but it almost makes, if we're going to do something, we want to do whatever is the least painful. But there are a lot of folks in Lansing that have, signed no tax pledges and do not want any increases whatsoever. And therein lies, I think, some of the problem with leadership, Republican leadership in Lansing, trying to come up with something to increase funding, because it takes taxes unless you're willing to take the funding from someplace else. And I certainly wouldn't advocate taking that education money, using that for the roads, and not plugging that hole in education. So that's one of the ways, increased taxes. I gave a little speech about 3 weeks ago, and I said something about increased gas, and kind of threw it out there like nobody would want. And somebody says, "Well, it's okay with me." There are folks that recognize, and it's going to take something, an increase. Because the amount of money I think that we're looking at to repair our roads, I think it's gone up astronomically with this winter in the 5-foot frost. And when that frost comes out, and it's heaved a lot of roads already. I was driving on one just the other day, and I went out of my way to get back on the expressway because it was where the seams came together. It was just terrible. It was like a washboard. And so I think we've got that going on all over the place.
How much traction came when the transportation official came from Pennsylvania a week or so ago, and he said essentially it's time to bite the bullet, whether we're looking at the increase in the proposals that were somewhat similar to what the governor had floated out there, whether we're talking the gas tax, the sales tax, the vehicle registration fees. And I ask this in the context, not wanting to pay that much more myself. I'm like every other taxpayer. Sure. But when I lived in Pennsylvania in the late 80s, at that time, sales tax here was still at 4%. In the Commonwealth, 1988 to 1990 when I was there, it was at 8 then. And that's I just will put that out there in terms of the perspective of what now is being talked about when we look at such a massive problem with the roads. What are your thoughts?
Well, Michigan has not been investing in the roads like other states have. And quite honestly, we are a state that really needs to make the major investments because of the freeze and thaw cycle. So something has to be done. And I'm willing to take a look at something. I mean, I would have to have a lot of conversations with my constituents to say, what do you think of this if there's at least a proposal out there? And I think the one that's probably the least painful to most folks is an increase in the sales tax. Whether it's 1% or it's going to be 2%, but I believe Michigan, as far as expenditures for roads, we rank number 50. So out of the 50 states, as far as our annual expenditure for roads, we spend the least. And I think it's catching up with us, the fact that we haven't been. And, and a lot of people say, and since I'm on TV, I get the chance to do this, look what's going to happen to your car. It's either, some folks will say you pay now or you pay later in automobile repairs. When you're going down these roads, like I referenced, obviously that's horrendous on your shocks and some of the other equipment in your suspension. So we've got to do something. And I'm willing to take a look at anything and then go back and have a discussion with my constituents to have the same discussion we're having right now about, because there are figures out there as far as what it costs people annually to repair their vehicle versus what it would cost them to pay to have the roads fixed. One concern I do have, though, is if we're going to fix some roads, we need to make sure whatever money we generate, that money filters down to the local municipalities. I don't want to see us go for money and then it only goes to state roads or federal highways. And in coming from municipal government, City of Bay City, the roads in the cities are just horrendous, and it's mainly because there's no money to fix the roads. Bay City, of course, is stuck with 2 bascule bridges that open and close. State owns 2, city owns 2. there's legislation that's been put in to try to get the state to take over the other two bridges, which would free up City of Bay City's $1 million that they use to operate those bridges, and they could use that for local streets then. So I'm willing to take a look at something, and start the discussion. And currently, there's just no discussion.
Briefly, in literally our last 30 seconds or less, that where do we stand in terms of the compromise, the $1 figure from the House, the other from the Senate, as to potentially what we would do in the emergency funding when the surplus is still on the table, as to spending that in at least an emergency stopgap measure, recognizing there's a bigger issue that's still unresolved.
And that's a supplemental that's going back and forth right now. It was voted on by the Senate. It got sent over to the House, and the House took quite a number of things out of the proposed supplemental that was sent over from the Senate. But one of the things they added back in was $115 million additional dollars in, I believe they call it the Road and Risk Fund, which basically allows them to determine who's going to get some of that money. And we were asked to send in projects. So I contacted the Bay County Road Commission and some of the local municipalities and said, what do you got that's ready to go? And we sent that list in. So I'm hoping when it goes back, because now it goes to conference, so the governor and leadership has to sit down and say, okay, we got to work this out now, and it'll come back to us for another vote after they conference, and hopefully we're able to keep some of that emergency funding in for roads, because you talk to folks now from municipalities and the road commissions, and they're into their summer maintenance money because of what it's cost to maintain these roads and the constant, the constant snow that we got over the snow and ice over the winter. They've had to pay, tremendous amounts of overtime, not to mention the salt and the equipment that it costs a lot of money to run. So I think we've got to keep some of that additional money in there to give to these folks that have to take care of the roads.
Well, we're going to have to leave the discussion there, but we can wish you safe travels to avoid those. It goes by quickly, I know, but we do, as always, appreciate your time and watch the potholes on your way back to District 96. Always good to see you.
I will. Thank you, David.
And thanks for joining us as well. A reminder that our program repeated tonight in the overnights here on CMU Public Television, and soon this program joining the others in our current season on our website. You can go to WCMU.org, click on television, and click on the local programs link for Capitol Report. For all of us here, I'm David Nicholas. Thanks for your time and attention as always, and we'll talk again.
You've been watching Capitol Report. Join us again as your elected officials speak to your concerns on current issues.